Welcome back, horror fans, cinephiles, and Giallo enthusiasts. It's Tanner Leeser, your host for The King in Giallo. This is episode 6 of the Forgotten Giallo film series, 1967, and I've got 3 Gialli I'd like to highlight. As always, thanks in no small part to Troy Howard's book on Giallo cinema, So Deadly, So Perverse, 50 Years of Italian Giallo Films, Volume 1, 1963 to 1973. Like this video and subscribe to The King in Giallo, and do ring that notification bell so those lords of the algorithm may bestow their blessing upon me, and you continue to be presented with weekly Giallo content. This all helps me build my brand here as I fight to get to 1,000 subscribers and get one step closer to monetization here on YouTube. On to the video. The Forgotten Giallo films for 1967 will spotlight 3 films. The first Giallo showcased for 1967 is Date for a Murder, an Italian and West German production. The film was directed by Mino Guerrini, written by Fernando De Leo and Mino Guerrini, and based upon a book by Franco Ena. Music is by Ivan Vandor. The cast consists of Giorgio Ardisson as Vince Dreiser, Halina Zaluska as Fidelia Forrester, Gunther Stoll as Commissioner Silvio Giunta, Hans von Borsody as Walter Dempsey, Mario Brega as Mario Galante, and Luciano Rossi as Massimo Tucci. The plot follows longtime friends Vince Dreiser and Walter Dempsey as they are reunited in Italy completely by chance. They plan to meet up later and catch up, but Dempsey doesn't show up and effectively goes missing. As Vince tries to find his friend, he is assaulted and nearly beaten to death by a group of thugs. The police commissioner Giunta tries to urge Vince to stay out of the matter, but at this point he is already locked in and determined to find some answers. Seeing that he won't quit, Giunta decides to team with Vince after the disappearance of Dempsey is discovered to be linked to a matter of industrial espionage. More bodies soon follow. The plot of Date for a Murder, with a few changes, would qualify as a straightforward spy thriller. However, the movie drops the ball in terms of keeping to the tropes of that genre, as it is rather long on action, as well as plot convolutions. The screenplay was co-written by Fernando De Leo, himself a contributor to the spaghetti western scripts of Sergio Leone, such as A Fistful of Dollars, 1964, and For a Few Dollars More, 1965. Afterward, he made the change to director and could be said to be the best director of polizieschi, with his films Caliber 9 and The Italian Connection. Both came out in 1972, as well as Shoot First, Die Later, 1974. Some gialli he directed are Naked Violence, 1969, and Slaughter Hotel, 1971. The director of the film is Mino Guerrini, who worked on the screenplay of The Girl Who Knew Too Much, 1963, by Mario Bava. Between 1964 to 1986, he directed over 24 films, with The Third Eye, 1966, being the main one he is remembered for. For the most part, the directing is top-notch. The camera angles and use of handheld cameras is great, and his acting scenes are executed with a stylish flair, but unfortunately the final chase scene is mishandled and comes off as corny and comedic because of his inclusion of fast-motion footage. The editing by Franco Fraticelli works in tandem with the directing and brings us such treats as a cut between a person falling from a rooftop to a watermelon being splattered on the ground. Likely, De Leo might have given the film a better and more polished final product, but as it is, the film is relegated to one of the gialli that is not necessary to check out unless you are a die-hard fan of the genre. Giorgio Ardisson leads the cast, himself born in 1931, making his first film appearance in sword and sandal pepla films and historical action-adventure films, such as Mario Bava's Hercules and the Haunted World, 1961, and Giacomo Gentilomo's The Last of the Vikings, 1961. With good looks and an athletic physique, Ardisson would become an ideal casting choice for Euro spy thrillers such as Operation Counterspy, 1965, and Agent 3S3 Massacre in the Sun, 1966. Fun fact, the German title of this film is Agent 3S3, Setz alles auf eine Karte. Artisan was also seen in numerous spaghetti westerns such as Grand Canyon Massacre, 1964, and Django Defies Sartana, 1970. He would also appear in a few gialli like Il tuo dolce corpo da uccidere, 1970, or A Suitcase for a Corpse, and Delitti, 1987, plus many more. Like Blood and Black Lace, the German co-financiers pushed for a German actor, and the result in this film is Gunther Stoll as the police commissioner. Stoll was seen in krimis such as The Hunchback of Soho, 1966, as well as some international co-productions like The Castle of Fu Manchu, 1969, directed by Jess Franco. Some other gialli he appears in are Double Face, 1969, and What Have You Done to Solange, 1972. Stoll and Artisan work very well together, and their chemistry reads as a pair of offbeat heroes. The love interest of Artisan is played by Halina Zaluska, who also does very well. Sergio Leone regular Mario Brega helps round out the supporting cast. The next film from 1967 is Deadly Sweet, an Italian and French production. The film is directed by Tinto Brass, who also wrote the film along with Francesca Longio and Piera Levi, and based upon a book by Sergio Donati. The music is by Armando Travajoli. The film stars Jean-Louis Trentillon as Bernard, Ewa Olin as Jane Burroughs, Roberto Biasco as David, Charles Kohler as Jerome Burroughs, and Luigi Bellini as Jelly Roll. Not that Jelly Roll. The plot is about Bernard becoming infatuated with Jane after meeting her in a nightclub. He discovers that her father has recently died in an accident, but according to Jane, she believes that he took his life as the result of being blackmailed by his second wife over some suggestive photos. Soon enough, the extorter is killed and the suspicion falls on Jane, but Bernard determines to prove she is being set up. During the 1960s, London was becoming a mecca for the hippie movement. Swinging London, as it was called, and with Michelangelo Antonioni's anti-giallo Blow Up, 1966, capitalizing on this setting, a new interest was established. His film received controversy for containing full frontal nudity, but this also spurred an interest to make similar films set in swinging London. Plus, the nature of Italian cinema of the time and their knack for ripping off others' ideas created a fresh bandwagon culture for Deadly Sweet to come to fruition. The film was based on the book Il Sepolcro di Carta by Sergio Donati, himself a contributor on numerous scripts, as well as being the one to organize the ideas of Leone, Bertolucci, and Argento for their spaghetti western Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968. He was also a skilled gialli writer and a novelist, and the giallo narratives he constructed were always handled with a deep respect for the audience, with stories that held together and made sense by the very end. Argento. Tinto Brass transposed the setting of the story to London while moving the story in a new direction. Plus, he went on to admit later that he was uninterested in making a conventional giallo film, and the result proves this. Brass directs the film with a stylish emphasis whilst utilizing a fast-paced editing which switches from bright and vibrant colors to stark black and white. Like Antonioni, he is disinterested in adhering to genre conventions. However, the end result is still a giallo. Brass was born in 1933 and began filming in the late 1950s, working as an assistant director. He transitioned to director in the early 1960s. He usually gave his films an avant-garde lean, but was not above making a straight film or genre film. Yankee, 1966, is an example. In the 1970s, he moved towards erotic subject matter and received acclaim for Salon Kitty, 1976, which got him seen by Penthouse magazine publisher Bob Guccione, who was on the lookout for a stylish director for his historical epic Caligula, 1979. Brass fought against Guccione and Gore Vidal and was ultimately barred from editing the film, resulting in Guccione adding in clips of graphic, hardcore sex scenes against the wishes of Brass, spurring him to demand that his name be taken off of the directing credit. He is credited with supervising the principal photography, however. Despite its success, Brass was deeply disappointed with that film. He would go on to make softcore sex movies such as The Key, 1983, Paprika, 1991, and All Ladies Do It, 1992. Deadly Sweet is his only Giallo film. French actor Jean-Louis Trintignant headlines the cast and was born in 1930, rising to prominence with his role in And God Created Woman, 1956, where he was opposite Brigitte Bardot. He cemented his casting as a romantic lead with his appearance in A Man and a Woman, 1966. Despite this, he pushed against being typecast. He received acclaim for his role in Z, 1969, by Costa Gavras, and Bernardo Bertolucci's The Conformist, 1970. He stayed in the international film scene even into the 1990s, winning accolades for Three Colors, Red, 1994, and Those Who Love Me Can Take the Train, 1999. Recently, he's been a stage actor. He was seen recently in Amor, 2012. Ua Olin plays Jane, herself born in Sweden in 1950. She gained international recognition for her starring role in Candy, 1968, alongside Marlon Brando, Richard Burton, Walter Matthau, and James Coburn. The two leads of Deadly Sweet would appear again later in the Giallo Death Laid an Egg, 1968. Plus, she'd be in the gothic thriller Giallo Death Smiled at Murder, 1973, with Klaus Kinski. The final film for 1967 is Killer Without a Face. It is directed by Angelo Dorigo, again billed as Ray Morrison, who also wrote and edited it. Music is by Coriolano Gori. The cast is comprised of Lawrence Tierney as the Mute, Gianna Medici as John Brenton, Janine Renal as Francis, Mara Burney as Barbara MacDonald, and Giuliano Raffaelli as Walter MacDonald. The plot of the film is about a group of people gathered in a castle being stalked by a killer. Barbara is the likely suspect because of her mental unbalance, but she could also just be the victim of being set up. John Brenton begins to investigate as the bodies continue to add up. The film begins with a well-executed and stylish stalk and murder sequence, then follows into a noteworthy opening credit sequence, then becomes marred and bogged down in too much talking. Howarth remarks that despite the occasionally atmospheric black and white cinematography, the film has earned its obscure status. The film is more focused on the characters than the thriller aspects, which mainly doesn't work because the characterization is at best sketchy. The red herrings are too forced and too obvious. Barbara's mental condition is unintentionally played at the expense of laughs. The abundance of characters are there just to be killed, but Howarth says that the ending double twist at least offers the viewer some surprises. Funny enough, the musical score is described as sounding like it was written for a completely different film. The composer has done great work before, so it's not to say that he wasn't capable. The film is slow and over-padded out, and the overabundance of flashbacks only further slow it down. Writer-director Angelo Dorigo worked previously on Come Assassino, 1966, talked about in the previous episode of the Forgotten Giallo film series. In Killer Without a Face, Dorigo acts as writer, director, and editor, and at best the film could be said that it is handled with a bland efficiency with a few interesting setups and sequences. The cast includes Lawrence Tierney, an American actor playing the role of a mute servant who might know the true identity of the killer. Born in Brooklyn in 1919, he entered films in the early 1940s, mostly doing minor roles, before finally landing the role of Dillinger, 1945. Over the years, he became known as a sort of tough guy, both on screen and off, which got him into hot water on more than one occasion with the law. Alcoholism and bad career choices, including turning down a role in On the Waterfront, 1954, which actually led to Rod Steiger receiving an Oscar nomination, more than prompted Tierney to travel to Italy to land some roles. Tierney does not do well here in this film unless overacting is considered good, which it's not. Fortunately for him, he was able to salvage his career and turn it around. He quit drinking and won acclaim with his role, which was rejected by Charles Bronson, in Reservoir Dogs, 1992, by Quentin Tarantino. He ended up doing some cameos in shows such as Seinfeld and The Simpsons, but until his death, he remained to be someone who was often difficult to work with. He died in 2002. Janine Renaud does very decently despite the script not helping her to do well. Born in 1930, she entered into film in 1965 and is best remembered for her appearances in Jus Franco's films Two Undercover Angels, 1967, Kiss Me, Monster, 1967, and Succubus, 1967, appearing alongside her husband of the time, actor Michel Lemoine, also appearing with him in the Giallo Run, Psycho, Run, 1968. She retired from films in the late 1970s. And those are the Forgotten Giallo films for 1967. I genuinely hope you learned something new. And if you are interested in watching these movies, look them up online. If you do watch them or you've already seen them, I invite you to leave your thoughts on them in the comments. Follow The King in Giallo on Instagram and give a like to The King in Giallo on Facebook. Subscribe here on YouTube if you aren't already, and join me every week for new Giallo film content. Upcoming content on The King in Giallo will be Episode 7 of the Forgotten Giallo film series, 1968, Part 1. Then, the overview, review, and Gialli Tally 4, Giulio Chesti's 1968 Proto Giallo, Death Laid an Egg. Thank you all very much for your continued support here. This is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo, and if nothing else, I'll see you next time.